Five Nights at Candy's was certainly one of the better known fan games to sink your teeth into back in 2015, and while these days it's far from a perfect fan game, people really seemed to get a kick out of it at the time. A simple, to the point homage to Five Nights at Freddy's. No crazy gimmicks, no goofs, no gaffs, just a fun alternative to Freddy's 1 that just worked. A colourful cast of characters, clean looking visuals, and some entertaining phone guy banter was all you really needed. Hell, even Scott Cawthon himself showed support for the game trailer on YouTube. It really puts into perspective how long ago this all was. But the game definitely had its flaws, with the glaring issue being just how similar it played to that original Freddy's game. I myself looked at it more of like an intentional parody rather than a unique fan game, but it's still a valid criticism for sure, and one thing I think a lot of people had issue with. So, like with every successful fan game in need of a sequel. So, with Five Nights at Candy's 1, I'm sure the creator, Emil Mako, knew there was far more potential to be had with Candy & Co. And so, a successor, Five Nights at Candy's 2, was released on February 28th, 2016. Candy's 2 is quite the departure from Candy's 1 in pretty much every aspect imaginable. Visuals, gameplay, sound design, it's all a totally different experience. And what better way to show all of that off other than to review the damn thing, so here we go. Once you make it past the title screen featuring a somewhat intimidating Candy, you're brought not straight to the main gameplay, but to a short introductory cutscene. Not really a cutscene, more like an interactive text conversation. The long and short of it, we, the protagonist, made a bet over some thing and lost said bet. As a result, we're committed to spending 5 nights in an old factory, featuring the old and decrepit roster of animatronic mascots, who else? Once this nameless dude has finished typing, you're free to respond, and you can type literally anything you damn well please, and boy howdy did I make use of that freedom. Yeah, right, so the premise of this game... I can't lie, it's pretty much just the bog standard. The once family-friendly animatronics are now old and broken and withered and shitty and gross and withered. You know, not the most original. But keep in mind this is still only early 2016, where fan games of this nature hadn't been completely burned out yet, so like, yeah, whatever. It gets a pass. Emil said it himself though, each of these Candy's games are intentionally fan games of FNAF 1 and 2, 2 and 3, and 3 and 4 respectively, so sure, it makes sense. Plus the guy does do something interesting with this idea. Stick around and you'll find out what. So, just like in the first game, here you're playing as Mary Schmidt. Or so you'd think. Mary and Marilyn are essentially the same name, but Marilyn Schmidt is apparently a different character entirely. As stated in the newspaper when you lose, Marilyn's only 17 in the year 2007, the year the gameplay takes place. So, as a Marilyn, you're required to sit in this factory until 6 AM each night. Sure, why not? There's hardly anything in terms of story that you'll find in the night segments, and the setup is obviously built around the gameplay, which, you know, if story isn't the focal point of your fan game, then it's fine in my book. First thing I should probably mention is that there is no phone guy this time, just a couple of tooltips explaining exactly how the game works, FNAF 4 style. I have mixed feelings on this. On the one hand, I understand that they're basically essential if you want to build an atmosphere like this without some asshole screaming at you about how everything's fine, but at the same time, I think it would have still been cool to have, you know, someone giving you tips, like, for example, what if the same guy you were talking to in the intro left you a message, even if only for the first night or two, maybe like bragging about how you're the one who's got to sit in that factory and they're sort of giving you vague tips, but in a way that doesn't necessarily sound like they know what's actually going on in there. I don't know, like a couple of lines, something like, yeah, you remember those weird robot things from Candy's and how they were noise sensitive? Yeah, they were freaky as hell, you know, something like that. I mean, that's just an example as I'm writing this script, you know, I'm sure something like that would have been cool, and tied it more to that introduction. Or, keeping it with the theme of old and abandoned Candy's props and animatronics, maybe have a few old training tapes lying around that just so happen to gloss over how each animatronic works and how they react to noise or whatever, kinda like FNAF 3. Anyway, I'm rambling, you get the idea. So, as it's likely painfully obvious at this point, this factory is where the core gameplay takes place. And the best way to describe the gameplay here is FNAF 2... but everyone is Springtrap. So you're situated in the bottom center of the map, 9 rooms you can view through the cameras orbiting your location. Similar to FNAF 2, you'll have a light to illuminate the long hallway ahead of you, no door in sight. What's different here, however, is 1, you're limited to a single camera flash on your phone, a flash beacon with a set amount of power, and 2, that light is only useful for checking if one of the robots has entered said hallway. That light ain't gonna do shit this time, so in order to stay alive, you gotta work with your environment to pull them away. Each room, for whatever reason, has a respective phone, and activating said phone creates noise that the animatronics are drawn to like a moth to a flame. And that's precisely how you defend yourself against the majority of the robots here. Thankfully, they don't work exactly like Springtrap, where there's only a chance that they'll wander away. No, as long as that room is vacant, they'll fall for it every time. But the room does have to have nobody in it, as activating a phone with one of the buggers already standing by, well, they'll straight up disable the phone, only temporarily mind you, but it becomes detrimental during later nights if you're not careful. Also, because the animatronics can be at 3 different positions in the hallway relative to you, but the first few nights I just assumed that because there are also 3 phones on either side of the building that you had to use the correlating phone to stop them. But no, literally any phone will work. Now it's safe to argue the remainder of the core gameplay is more or less borrowed from FNAF 3, or rather how those mechanics will play out in a map like this. Candy, Cindy and Blank will wander around the 6 situated rooms, posing really no threat in this state. It really doesn't matter which room they're in either. If they ever do decide to attack, they'll always approach from the far side of the building, so don't be a dumb idiot like me and try to constantly lure all the animatronics to cams 12 and 13. They ain't gonna get you that easy. And of course, they'll pop out when they feel like it, lure them back to any vacant camera, rinse and repeat. But there are 2 other animatronics here that keep the game varied. First you've got Chester. He's relatively simple to get the hang of. You'll hear a sound cue of him banging on any one of the vents, and it's your job to seek him out. Call the phone in that room and he'll piss off into no man's land. And for those listening with stereo sound, a rare occurrence in 2019, I'm aware, you'll hear him further to the left or to the right, indicative of which room he's situated in. This doesn't totally eliminate the need to check the cameras, while the sound cue panning will differ slightly depending on the specific camera, especially with all the ambience. It's difficult to determine which of the 3 left or right rooms he's in exactly, but it's certainly helpful in tracking him down. And trust me, you don't want to check the cameras too often. Right, so hear me out. Imagine a world where Phantom Balloon Boy from FNAF 3 was even more of a dickhead. That's right, it's the Penguin. Now okay, let's explain this here. He essentially functions pretty much identical to Balloon Boy. He'll appear on your screen if you're not quick enough to switch to a different camera or flip up your monitor. He'll temporarily disable your security system. Fairly similar concept to BB messing with the ventilation. But at least in that game, the ventilation is not as essential as viewing and interacting with the animatronics in this game. Like in FNAF 3, I get it, you got time to fix your screw up. There's only one guy to deal with, but especially in FNAF 2's 720, once he appears, you gotta make a split-second decision, which essentially just becomes an insta-kill because you're never given enough experience during main gameplay to instinctively know how to deal with him. And I think he really is only this much of a problem on 720. In earlier nights, you're given a little more time to deal with the bastard, but man, he's so goddamn annoying. I think the reason in general he doesn't work great is because he's such a unique case that's far more demanding than having to seek out which camera Chester's on, for example. The Penguin bears the only mechanic that involves a split-second reaction, and it's not handled in the best way. I think it also helps in FNAF 3 that you've also got to look out for Phantom Chica and Phantom Mangle, who behave in the same way as Phantom BB, and get you used to that behavior, so subconsciously you're always more aware. I think if the Penguin's difficulty states only changed how much he pops up on your screen, and not for how long he pops up on your screen, that would feel leagues more fair to me, and I probably wouldn't feel cheated out of winning the night. But hey, out of the entirety of the gameplay, that's really the only gripe I have. Nights 1 to 5, 6, 7, 20... Other than the Penguin, I think everyone has their place, and all in all, it's actually pretty decent fun. One thing I thought I'd mention though, on night 6 where you're faced with the rat and introducing the cat, I actually feel like that night was a lot easier than intended maybe. Basically everybody else is gone, and these two pretty much just fill the roles of everybody else, with the cat banging on the vent, and the rat filling the role as... But I never felt as in danger with these two, because there were just less robots to track down. I don't know, I mean it's still pretty satisfying to prevent these guys from kicking your ass, so... yeah, I don't know. So difficulty balancing as a whole in this game, really not too bad. The gameplay certainly doesn't have the same problem as Candy's 1, where you're essentially doing nothing for the first night or two. These guys, they're more or less constantly active. I think it also helps that the mechanics are relatively unique, of course in the sense that they're almost like remixed versions of FNAF 2 and 3's gameplay styles, but it means that anybody who's played those two games might get a kick out of how they're handled here. That's not all of the gameplay covered though. In addition to 720 mode, there's also what is simply referred to as Nightmare, which is arguably much easier. Yes, these two mofos back at it again, and yeah, genuinely, the only thing that ever killed me here was the system error thing, and the one time I was too late on finding the cat. And I didn't finish it legitimately because it's just pure luck on not getting the system error, which I didn't want to stick around for longer than I had to avoid getting. Yeah, legitimately. More on that in a bit. So, after completing a night, you're greeted with a minigame. Yeah, we're hitting all those Fangame cliches. For real though, the visual presentation of these minigames is arguably more appealing, objectively of course, but certainly more technologically accurate than the faux Atari FNAF 3 styled minigames you usually find in these tributes. It's like they're being played off an old CRT or something. What, with the visibly dirty overlay and scan lines that the pixels snap to perfectly. Again, with this guy taking the time to add extra detail to his Fangame that actually does improve the experience as a whole. Chill out, bro! These minigames really only serve story purpose, with the majority of them taking place at that original Candy's Bugs and Fries we played in during Candy's 1. Each minigame has you playing as a different character. You'll rotate through each mascot you encounter during that game, essentially just playing fetch quest after fetch quest. Picking up the dismembered robot parts of Chester the chimpanzee, collecting drawings, you know, that sort of thing. Occasionally you'll have to follow this lad who I can only assume to be Shadow Candy. And that's really the gist of it all. Like last time, I'm not here to uncover all the hidden secrets of the story, but you know, I can still appreciate these minigames for what they are. Upon Night 5's completion, you're given access to a barrage of these minigames, first following Shadow Candy as Old Candy, then collecting drawings as Blank, and finally again as Old Candy, dealing with bad parenting. What can I say, he deserved it. So yeah, that's most of the gameplay covered. But I got a confession to make, guys. I never beat 720 mode, and this is just a secret between you and I never finished Nightmare mode either. What? But how? By some strange glitch that is far too common, just by complete chance. If you're playing the regular gameplay with Candy, Cindy, Chester and all that, this doesn't work with the rat and the cat in the same way. If you die to anyone, sometimes the game will just... yeah, the game is stuck like this until 6 AM. You can't interact with anything, and nothing can interact with you. You're essentially invincible in this state. And yeah, you can complete the night like this. Now, if you're thinking I immediately bypassed 720 and Nightmare mode with this, no, that would be doing the game injustice, and I wouldn't be doing my job right now, would I? I definitely still put a good few hours into each respective mode, but purely for the sake of wanting to cover as much as possible, I started intentionally killing myself to try and get the glitch. And only 3 attempts in, I was home free. I am incredibly certain that Emil Mako probably knows about this, but for some reason it's still prevalent to this day. He acknowledges that it's an issue that he supposedly fixed, but for reference, I did play through Candy 2 in the latest patch, 1.07. Yeah, I dealt with this at least twice during the first 7 nights, completely by chance. And it's hard not to kind of feel bad because this totally eliminates the challenge. I mean, even with the rat and the cat where simply dying doesn't activate the glitch, I was just messing with the monitor and calling random rooms while the cat was banging on a nearby vent. And exactly the same thing happened and I skipped the night. But hey, those with integrity will restart the game and beat the thing legitimately. Huh? What? So that's a wrap on the gameplay side of things, and I'd argue that despite how much more simple the gameplay looks and feels at surface value, Candies 2 has a lot more going on under the hood and is therefore a more engaging and fun experience in my opinion. Personally, I think it trumps Candies 1 gameplay by a long shot. That game just drags on, and while the remastered version did have that cool secret boss that switched up the gameplay, you dealt with too many animatronics in the same way. But hey, that's all fixed now, so I can't complain. So the next obvious question is, how do the visuals hold up? And okay, this is something I'm kind of conflicted on. Just like Candies 1 for the first time, yeah, Candies 2 has a lot of that trademark Mako polish that is just pleasing to look at. However, the environments in this game are a tad too bland for my tastes. Don't get me wrong though, I get what Emil was going for. It's an old worn down factory / warehouse that in universe obviously isn't designed for looks, but each room just kinda looks identical. And I don't mean that necessarily in a literal sense, like after a while, yeah, it's not like I couldn't form an association between each room and its respective camera. But it's like every room has the exact same level of decoration, if you want to put it that way. Each one is just 1 or 2 pieces of furniture, a few shelving units maybe, a few drawings on the wall. Nothing stood out to me as, well, unique. Like imagine if one room was just a dumping ground for a ton of old broken electronic parts. Or maybe one room's more focused on furniture storage, or I don't know, just anything that might make the rooms feel like they have a use, a purpose. And this is something I'd argue that Candies 1 actually did better than 2. In that game, each room had a use and had appropriate props and construction that reflected that, you know? Anyway, it's not a major issue. As it stands, I think the setting is actually pretty cool, and surprisingly not something I've seen a lot in Fangames. To be clear, I do not browse GameJob for Fangames very often, so I could be totally wrong on that statement, but, you know, it works for Candies, why not? If changes were made to this, I wouldn't expect any major overhauls. In fact, I think keeping a couple of the rooms just the way they are would be ideal for that variety. Also, I think the way flashing your light down the hallway here compared to FNAF 2 is far creepier. Having that split-second camera flash to view your enemy, casting that shadow behind them, always felt like a spookier choice to me than giving you access to a fairly limitless flashlight in an already fairly bright environment. Couple this with the fact that the animatronics are constantly on the move and are very clearly advancing towards you. And overall, it's not an overshoot to say that this is the superior game if you actually want some tension. Also, I think it's high time I mentioned the way Chester's animation works. It's one of my favourite little things in this game. When you look at him banging on the vent door, it's implied that you're watching him in real time, just at an incredibly low frame rate, which is cool on its own, but watch this. It's great. Yeah, it just looks dope as hell to watch him speed off like that. Obviously it's just the mind filling in the gaps here, which is why it doesn't look janky as all hell, but definitely a good move on Emil's part. Could have just done the same thing with Chester as with the other animatronics, just have him teleport out of the room, but no. You went with the cooler route. But tossing all of that aside, if there's one thing to appreciate in the visual presentation department... that Windows 95 aesthetic. I don't know, maybe it's because my earliest memories of the internet were right at the tail end of that era that I got a soft spot for it. But I don't know, man, I've always just kind of been a fan of that UI. If the Penguin's error message didn't look so cool, I would have punted the little shit out of my window hours ago. And to most people, a detail as seemingly small as this might not matter that much at face value, but it's primarily what you'll be interacting with for the entirety of the game, so I think having a decent looking UI is proper important. One thing that doesn't totally add up here would be the fact that the factory supposedly closed in 1993, but you know, this is the same universe in which USB ports existed 7 years prior to when they were invented, so, you know, sky's the limit when you don't give a infringement. Oh, speaking of the newspaper I got this from, yeah, looks like the factory we're playing in during Candies 2 is the same factory where these two kids died. Cool. Okay, with all the nights beaten, time to head over to the rest of the extras menu. And yeah, it's about what you'd expect. Nothing as fancy as Candies Remastered, but you got full renders of the animatronics, jump scares, and also a dedicated section to some behind the scenes stuff. Development sketches to be exact. At least here we can finally get a good look at each of the quote unquote withered animatronics. And I can safely say they range from looking like genuinely well made and accurately torn apart models to ugly as piss. Okay, the plastic animatronics do actually look quite cool. They're not withered in the same sense as FNAF's withered and nightmare animatronics. I always thought that the random and excessive holes and tears just kinda looks weird and stupid. No, here you actually got disassembled and cracked plastic parts, revealing pinholes and skeleton parts and all sorts. It makes sense and looks good. But withered blank is just not the most appealing model to look at in my honest opinion. It's nothing to do with like the tears and holes, I think. I mean, the rat and cat designs here are definitely decent and they have the same thing going on, but something about blank just rubs me the wrong way here. I'm thinking it might just be down to the lack of detail in the materials. He looks like he used a razor. This is something that was fixed with Candies Remastered, and you know, admittedly he does look kinda cool in a couple of frames, but I wouldn't be fussed if Emil just went with the Candies 1 model. I mean, the rat hardly looks much different from that game here. Why is Blank so beat up in comparison? Kind of a minor complaint, and like I mentioned, in the right scenario, he looks kinda creepy. But here, nah, he just looks like a piece of school equipment. On a final note, can we take a second to appreciate how kick-ass the menu theme sounds? It's this atmospheric, synthy electric piece with that ominous blaring horn in the back. It's actually kind of awesome. It's fit with these ambient digital sounds, and yeah, it's good. In terms of the soundtrack as a whole, yep, it constitutes as 50% of it, right at home in the same camp as Candies Remastered in terms of quantity. The other original track here is the ending theme, which is definitely nice and suits the mood. But come on man, give me that big crutch percussion. There's also the minigame theme if that counts. I did speed it up and it's the music used in the extras menu on Candies 1. I'm aware it's not part of the OST, but for those curious, that's a tad bit of trivia. Alrighty, so now that that's all said and done, that's it for most of the game. Except for one of the stars on the menu screen. What's that about? Oh yeah, very cute. It's a teaser for FNAF 3. Ooh, I wonder what is going to happen in that game is what I would be saying if I was posting this review about 3.5 years ago. As I wrote the script, it dawns on me that Candies 2 is nearly 4 years old. But yeah, that really is everything to discuss it. In closing, I think Five Nights at Candies 2 is certainly a step up from its predecessor in nearly every department. Yeah, it lacks a bit in the way of visual presentation in a couple of cases, and the Penguin is a bitch to have to deal with. But despite that, I still had a good time with this one. So, now the question is, if Candies 1 is essentially a fangame of FNAF 1 and 2, and Candies 2 is a fangame of 2 and 3, how in the hell do you combine Five Nights at Freddy's 3 and 4 into a fulfilling, comprehensible experience?